Hello everybody, hope you're all good. We're back for another episode, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about self-examination and self-awareness. I've got my lemon and ginger tea. Very nice. I've actually been taking some time away from caffeine at the moment. Last time I had caffeine was the end of last year, very beginning of this year, I can't remember, and I've not really missed it, to be honest. It's so ironic because I've just bought a Sage Barista Pro coffee machine and I've not been using it. I bought that about 6 months ago or something, and I was getting good at latte art, but since I've stopped drinking coffee because I've not really wanted caffeine, I've just come away from it, and it's not been getting its use. So that's not ideal, but I do feel so much better and I'm not as up and down in terms of energy levels across the space of the day, and my mental clarity seems to improve so much more as well. So yeah, I'm going to keep running with that, and I'm definitely on like this path where I'm just trying to remove as many external stimulus that I can. So caffeine being one of them. I've not really been drinking. I think last time I was drunk was last summer, so it was quite some time ago. I've obviously had a drink since then, and I haven't this year, but this December really was the first December that I did without really having a drink, which was, yeah, different, especially when you come from like a very kind of like old-fashioned background where, you know, you're drinking with your family, you're going to pubs, it's pub culture. I think that's kind of like working class culture of the UK, to be honest. So it's probably the same for the majority of people. But that's kind of the background. So when you do something different, obviously it's different, and it's sometimes tricky for that to feel like the norm. So it's just been taking some time to get sorted. But I wanted to start today's episode with a little bit of a writing that I've done. So this is a passage, and I've been calling them short stories, but I don't know if it's a short story. I think it's just more so like a passage or like a message or a lesson that I've learned or something that I've maybe gone through or going through. And writing for me has been a really good way that I've been able to express myself and my emotions, especially over this past year. And I've always journaled. I've journaled way more consistently probably for the past 12 months. I've probably journaled every day for the past 12 months. But I have journaled over the past kind of like 4 or 5 years, and it's been really eye-opening because it's allowed me to self-reflect, develop self-awareness, and explore my internal world. And that's actually the title of this podcast. I wanted to talk a little bit about self-awareness and self-examination and why I think it is absolutely integral, quintessential for living a healthy and whole life. And that's just based off my own experience, especially over these past 12 months. And I know in the last episode I did mention about doing an episode talking about that journey and the process and different parts of that. And I very much still am almost kind of preparing for that a little bit mentally and just getting myself into the correct headspace, because obviously I do have to be pretty raw and pretty open, which I'm willing to do because I think it will be really beneficial for other people to hear and listen to that journey so they can maybe resonate or head on something similar themselves. Doesn't have to be as maybe catastrophic as mine, you could say. Some may have to, you never know. But it could be good for other people to listen and maybe use for their journey. So I'm still kind of preparing for that. And what I'm finding with how I'm setting these up now is I'm also doing them when I feel like I'm ready to do them, instead of just planning in every week that this is the structure, this is the thing. Instead of getting to a point where I feel like I'm ready to talk about something and then exploring that in really good detail, and being in almost like a flow state, which is almost what I wait for now, to ensure that the quality and what I'm talking about is coming from a good place and like a place of passion, I suppose, and coming from my heart, instead of just kind of butchering something up and trying to structure it and getting it all laid out in place and then having a really rigid plan and then sticking to the plan and making sure I don't miss anything out. It almost kind of ruins the originality and authenticity of it, I suppose, which is a nice topic that leads on to the whole point of why you actually want to integrate your subconscious and you want to be more self-aware and you want to examine yourself and understand who you are and why you are the way that you are, as difficult that can be, because it gives you a great sense of control, and it gives you self-knowledge to be able to self-regulate. And that is something that I don't know many people can do nowadays. Not to kind of sit on a high horse and say, this is what I do now, looking down at everybody. In no way, shape or form am I doing that. But I don't truly believe that many people who can do that nowadays, because it is such a large thing to do, and probably because of the requirements of almost like the entry requirements to get to that point are so large and require so much time and solitude and reflection that people don't have that nowadays because of the way that society is built. But I will come back to that in a moment. I'm going to read this short passage. And with writing, I've probably been writing for the past 3 or 4 months, and we're going to this writing group. Very different to the way that I write, but it's been a really good way to express myself. And yeah, I think it's really good to articulate really difficult ideas and be able to put them on page. And it's really helped my communication, especially within what I do as well with coaching, because a lot of what I do is basically talking over complex topics, trying to dumb them down to allow somebody who doesn't really understand that topic area, really give them really good detail and allow them to have good insights and be able to understand it. And I guess writing's been a really good way of me being able to do that. And that's something that I've done over the years with my coaching too, just writing things with a post that I've done and stuff like that. Anyway, I'm gibbering. So this one is called The Courage to Choose Oneself, and it leads kind of nicely onto the things that I wanted to talk over today, but I thought this would be quite a cool spin maybe on this podcast. So, there once was a time where you would lose part of yourself to let someone else stay. You would hide your truth, not speak your mind, bury parts of your heart and accept love that you thought you deserved. It was almost subconscious to prioritise the needs of others and not your own. Living out of fear, masked as love, you dance in the masquerade ball of life, hiding behind the costume that pulls you further and further away from who you truly are. Well, not anymore. True love is born out of courage. The courage to treat yourself with the utmost of respect, to not quieten your voice, to not stand for the love that you don't deserve, and to value yourself in the highest regard. Be someone you fight for. This begins with true self-awareness, realising you deserve respect, love, time, understanding, attention, value, to be listened to be cared for, to be nurtured, cherished, held. You deserve it all and more. You've now learnt that your soul is not up for negotiation. Deep trust with yourself, rooted in your bones, exudes confidence to set and maintain boundaries, to not go back on your word, to have finally regained a sense of gravitational pull, one with you at the epicentre, as the provider of light, warmth and sense of belonging. You are comfortable in your own presence, whole and securely attached to your true authentic self. You no longer need to give yourself away like you used to. You can now choose you with no regrets or doubt, no guilt, shame or cynical rumination. You've had the courage to carve this path. You're the hero of your world, and you've stared fear in the eye and became comfortable. This call to adventure has led to an abundance of loss. People have departed, and with some you don't even see eye to eye. These can be upsetting and sad truths, but ones that were and are essential for you to grow and heal. The right people will come to you. You will feel it in their presence. It'll be like a breath of fresh air. They listen to every word and mirror back to you the love that you've longed for and deserve. The heavy focus you used to carry with others evaporates when you switch that to looking and honouring with what's within. To find love out there, you must look in here. You must have given to yourself and continue to do so until you can truly give to others. Your world begins to change. It signals back to you the respect and honour you show to yourself. So that is called The Courage to Choose Oneself. A little bit scrappy, I must admit, but yeah, they're getting somewhere. And I think I wanted to share that because last time that I was at the writing group that I go to, I shared for the first time and I was so nervous. I was so nervous. I was like, my hand was shaking and the page was like trembling and my voice was cracking up, and there was only like 12 to 15 people in the room, but the kind of personal things, especially the first one that I read was very personal, and it was kind of dark as well. It was kind of pretty dark. I kind of pre-warned everybody in the room, this is not the lightest topic in the world, so apologies for starting the evening this way. But it felt really good to read it and almost like put it out into the world. And that's why I wanted to read that one there, probably more so for a selfish standpoint, but I don't know whether anybody else can resonate. So on to today's podcast, 10 minutes intro. Here we go. 10 minutes of waffle to get to this point. So true self-awareness and self-examination is, what I believe is essential to live an authentic life and to develop wholeness. And I think in this day and age, especially with like the hot external pressures of society and our peers and what it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman, and the world and your family and social media and the algorithm and everything is pushing us and molding us in certain ways to be certain people. And especially when we're younger. And I know you'll probably have a little bit more understanding of that if you go and listen to the last podcast that I did talking about how trauma can kind of impact every decision that we make. But us as human beings, we have a personality, we have a persona, we are certain people, and we're not just the way that we are because we are the way that we are. We are the way that we are because of the way that we've been treated, the way that we haven't been treated, the beliefs that we hold about ourselves, the beliefs that we don't hold about ourselves, the experiences that we've had. All of the collection of all of these different things together will join to make you who you are. And we are pulled by forces in different directions, not only on a conscious level, but also on a subconscious level. And I think it's really important to be aware of this. And there's a quote by Carl Jung that I love, and I've wrote it down. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And this past year, that quote has rang so true to me because what I've been trying to do is integrate my subconscious mind. And I was forced into a position where I had to do this. It was almost a non-negotiable. I got to a position where it was either doing that or I probably wouldn't be here anymore, which is obviously very tricky and scary. And because I didn't know anything about subconscious, even the word trauma or traumatic was very kind of like a difficult thing for me to listen to and swallow, because the emotional world and the emotional realm wasn't really that much of a thing. It was to some extent, of course, but when it came to myself, it almost wasn't really a thing. And that was just due to my past and experiences and upbringing, etc. And I was kind of like, all of this was brought to my attention where I had to start integrating my subconscious. And at the time, I didn't know that was the goal, to integrate my subconscious and to understand why I am the way that I am and develop a better sense of self-understanding and self-awareness. It was just, this is the path that was shown in front of me, and all I could see was the next step, and all I could follow was just that next bit of dirty road that I had to head down. And looking back on the past 12 months now, with the experiences that I have had and the kind of like eye-opening lessons, profound lessons, you could say, that I've had, I can now see that. I can take a step back and I can see it from a larger perspective, and I can understand that that's pretty much what I've been doing in certain ways. And that process and journey is so painstakingly hard. And this goes back to what I mentioned before about why I think most people probably won't do this for their whole life, or they wait until they're 60 and they have a midlife crisis, and then it kind of happens naturally as they kind of fizzle out at the back end of their life, and then they start to develop to have more time. Or people, they can't get to the position because they might not have the time, they might not have sometimes the knowledge or the resources as well. Things like kind of the stillness and the slowness and the solitude to be able to get to a position where you can start to integrate that. And that's because of the way that society is set up today, with how fast-paced everything is, and how everybody is on this kind of hedonic treadmill, and I guess just treadmill in general, and this hamster wheel where you go to school and then you go to college or you go to university or you get an apprenticeship and then you get a job and then you work your job and then you work 9 to 5 for somebody else. That's the majority of your time gone, and then you're adding all of these different things like a nice car and a house and a mortgage and all of these different liabilities that you have to pay for every single month. And friggin' Klarna, like Klarna, man, Jesus. I've never used Klarna, and I don't know why people use Klarna, because it's just like you're just adding things to pay for every single month. It doesn't really digest in my brain that well. But you have like this long list of things that you have to be paying for, and then you're chasing your tail every month. You're chasing your tail every month to pay the payments to somebody else, to then pay for more payments and other things and the interest on your other things. And you do that every year. And I'm not saying that I'm kind of devoid from this, because I'm in my house, and this has a mortgage and so on and so forth. And there's things that I pay for every single month. So of course, there's going to be things that we are going to do with life being the way that it is today. I'm not talking about detaching from society completely and just going AWOL and going and living as a monk, even though, that could be pretty decent. I was actually chatting to a fellow in the sauna yesterday, and he said he went to live with the monks, which was quite interesting. So it was cool to hear a story. But everybody's on this kind of hedonic treadmill. And they're chasing the tail, and they don't have time to slow down. They don't have time to look outside of their situation and gain a greater perspective and see another way of life, because the way of life that they are living is the only way of life they've ever known. That's the way of life that they've been told that they should live, and there is nothing outside of that, because that's all that they know. That's all that's within their consciousness. And that's why I probably think why traveling can be so good, and most people go away and quote unquote find themselves and come back wearing like a good baggy pair of like hippie pants. I don't know what you call them. And then they hang like a canvas on their front wall or like on the bedroom wall in uni. And it's like, I've been traveling with loads of tattoos. No, I'm not putting those people down. I actually think it's pretty cool, because when you go away and you travel, you're forced into learning lessons, seeing other ways of life, generating another perspective outside of the perspective that we are told. And I think for a lot of people, that's actually why they go traveling. It's to break away from this kind of norm and this kind of race and this hedonic treadmill and this way of life. And in the UK anyway, that things should be this way. They always have been this way. And that, pardon me, and that's what they're going to be like moving forward. And people who kind of like go traveling, I think sometimes they want to break free from the shackles of that and almost want to have a little bit more freedom internally, but externally as well. And that's almost like a call to adventure that they have, and they kind of crave that. And a lot of the time that's because as a human being, it's not about being within these shackles. It's not about being in this lane that somebody else says that this is the lane, this is your lane, and you should stay in that lane. It's not about that. It's about understanding who you truly are, and then understanding what lane you should take. And that's why it's really important to develop self-awareness and self-examination, because if you don't take time to truly understand that, you will be running somebody else's race for the rest of your life. And that's what the majority of people do. Again, especially in the UK. There's this kind of culture that, it's kind of like, especially kind of the culture, I think, around like football and drinking and things like that, because it's like you go to the pub, you watch the footy, you wear certain clothes, you almost like you attach yourself to these different societies and different things that have a certain way of life. And I guess that we all do that in certain ways. And I'm not saying that is bad in any way, but I think they're conducive to just living a very similar life to what everybody else has lived, when there's no real true authenticity in that. There's no true, personalization in some sense. And the acceptance of anything outside of that when you're in that is almost frowned upon or looked down on. and it's almost as if you are an outsider if you do take that leap of faith. And I've definitely felt that, not always from like an external pressure, but also internally as well. I felt that because I felt like I've been a little bit, different to that. I guess in some sense I've been a little bit different to that. And I've always wanted more out of life, or I've always taken a different perspective to what the majority of people have and say. And it's allowed me to be able to build my life in a way that's given me great freedom, and build a life where I can control things that I want to do. And that's not to say that we just want to have freedom all of the time, because I don't think that would be very, very good. There has to be constraints, and there has to be healthy boundaries that you develop in accordance with who you are, of course. But to take another perspective is you can then start to build a life which is much greater than the one that is constrained and shackled up at home. I say at home, with all of these old kind of ideologies maybe that's seeping through into society. And if you truly take time to understand yourself, you can then start to carve your path moving forward. Or I wouldn't even say sometimes you would carve your path as much as you would in some sense. The path starts to reveal itself. It's almost like the fog begins to clear. And that's almost like the gift that you get, I believe, that when you do start to look internally in lots of ways, the path does start to appear. And it's almost like, everything falls into place, and then you kind of go on this adventure, and that there's like a call to adventure, and you follow that path. And whatever is down that path is the adventure of a lifetime, which is what we're here for, in many ways. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the subconscious, because I think this is a really important topic, and hopefully I can give some insight around this. And I'm by no means a psychologist or anything like that. I just like to read. I love psychology. I love to understand the mind. And again, I've been forced to understand the mind with what the journey has been like over the past kind of 12 months, or even like you could say 5 to 7 years. Because self-development has been something that I've absolutely loved, and mindset has been something that I've gravitated towards my whole life, probably because I've struggled with it most, and I've tried to find the answers most. And I think that's just a prime example of how, as humans, we gravitate towards certain things, we do certain things, sometimes not because it's just an interest, it's because we feel something inside of us, which is an insufficiency or a void. And there is super compensation in another direction. And that's definitely one of the reasons why I committed my life to self-development in some ways. And again, this is one of the ways of how the subconscious and your ego and your shadow, and when I say shadow, I don't want anybody to drift there, because it's not some hippy-dippy stuff. Your shadow is part of your persona, it's part of you in yourself as a person. And we need to integrate that along with our ego to ensure that we can become whole. But one of the reasons why I committed my life to self-development, and this is probably one of the hard truths I had to accept about myself over this past year, is like, I have always felt a sense of insufficiency. I have not felt worthy. I have not felt sometimes lovable. I have not felt like I have been whole. I've felt like there is a void. I have been alone. Like lots of these beliefs that I've carried inside that I never knew were there. But because I carried these things, I would super compensate in the other direction. So, for example, I would work hard on myself, harder than anybody else, because I felt like I needed to do that because I had a sense of insufficiency inside of me, which wasn't there. And my mind hid that from me because it was so painful, and it didn't want to look back. It just wanted to look at where was the answer in the moment, where was the answer right now that I needed to solve that issue, to solve that problem. When it's not always about what's out there and finding the next solution and the answer to the problem out there. It's about going in here and understanding that voice and listening to that voice, and then rewiring that voice and changing the way that the beliefs that you hold about yourself. But I would super compensate, and I would subconsciously push myself to lengths with my body and my bodybuilding, and then that would have a huge sense of control of what I would do on the day-to-day basis, the food that I would eat, the amount of food, how I would weigh everything. I would control as many of these variables as possible. And the reason why I did this and why I committed so much of my life to my work is because my self-worth was tied up in it. It's because that was part of my self-worth. I would chase the external because I didn't feel good internally. This would be a short-term strategy to fill that void and that hole to make me feel good enough in the moment. But then that would be, it's almost like, having a fag. If you're stressed, you think that the fag is going to make you feel better, but it makes you feel better for 30 minutes. And then in an hour later, you need another fag. So you keep on chasing and you keep on chasing. And that's the nature of the short-term instant gratification, the emotional reason that we have in our brain, and how our limbic brain will speak to us, which is the emotional part of our brain, to get that short-term happiness, dopamine hit in the moment to make us feel good, because sometimes we don't. And that's the chase, and that's where the majority of addiction comes from as well, in many ways. And that's why they say addiction comes from complex trauma. But that is a lot of addiction comes from complex trauma. But that is a different episode within itself. So coming back to the subconscious, and I know I keep kind of leaping off here, but we have our self, which is who we are. And that's obviously going to be made up of like our conscious and our subconscious mind and our personality. And then we've got our ego. Everybody has an ego. And then we've got our shadow self. Everybody has a shadow. And our shadow is almost like our unconscious and subconscious. And we're impacted by these things. And obviously we have our persona, so how we put ourselves out to the world. And these things can be played out in the world as really positive things, but they can actually be coming from a very negative place. So just use myself, for example, again. Obviously, I work so hard on my business and I work so hard on my body, and I would post pictures of my progress online, and it would be great because it would motivate other people. And I found purpose in that, which is fantastic. But that was actually coming from a place of insufficiency. My ego was driving that to get external validation, to build the business, to have a house, to have a nice car, to have the good body. It was all based off insufficiency, which was part of my shadow, my subconscious, which was then almost super compensating into my ego and making me act in certain ways. And once I started to learn about that, I needed to let go of that. But that was very difficult because that's part of you. And if you do hold beliefs, let's say in your subconscious, that sometimes aren't that good, and this isn't going to be the same for everybody, by the way, this is obviously a personal experience for me, but if you hold beliefs in your subconscious that, and I wouldn't say aren't that good, but let's say aren't healthy, as we mentioned last week, then you kind of supercompensate in certain ways. And this is a subconscious reaction within the body. This happens like absolutely autonomously. It's not something that you do consciously. There are going to be conscious actions that we do to make us feel better and do certain things, of course, but there's going to be drivers inside of you and everybody that cause us to be the way that we are and do the things that we do. And that's why, coming back to that quote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate. Because if we don't understand really what our unconscious is, then it's going to be driving our life. It's almost the puppet master and we are the puppet, because we can't control our responses. I didn't think when I was building a business to try and earn more money and get a great body and post my body online and get external validation. I wasn't thinking, right, I'm going to make more money. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to get a better body. I'm going to put my body out there so I can feel better about myself, to have external validation. I didn't make the conscious decision to do that. That was absolutely autonomous and automatic because of part of the shadow in which I held. And there's different parts of the shadow as well. If you kind of thinking, how do I begin, to do this? I think a good way to do this is journaling. A great way to start is journaling, because that gives you the space to be able to explore and, go back and forth and just talk over, like, even just your experiences on what happened today and like how you responded to certain things. Because you might find that when certain situations arise in your life, you respond in a certain way. Now, you respond in a certain way because of sometimes the belief that you hold and the way that you were treated or your past experiences. So that means that your response and your reaction is totally subconscious and you don't have any control over that. And that was one of the reasons why I actually started to begin therapy in the first place, is because I saw sometimes the way that I was reacting and responding didn't align with who I was as a person. So it was almost as if there was two people inside of me. I was detached and disconnected. And it was almost as if in certain situations and environments, I would be this person and respond in this way, but I would have the self-awareness to step back and be like, why the hell did you do that? What was that all about? And it was that disconnect really that drove me to then start to go to therapy and start to try and develop a deeper level of understanding and self-awareness. So a lot of your shadow is things that you've repressed in your life. So things that you push down. Now that could be authenticity, which goes back to the reading that I said at the start. Authenticity, being yourself. People kind of shave off the edges, don't they, and just push their square peg into a round hole, and they lose their authenticity just to fit in, to be part of the tribe. Going back to the kind of football and drinking culture, not to say that is bad in any way, by the way, and those people don't have any self-awareness or understanding, of course. It's not that, but just using that as an example, and there are probably hundreds of others of things as well. So the parts of yourself that is in your shadow are things that you repress. That could be anger, that could be resentments. And these things that if you repress down, so for example, if you hold your word and not, let's say, display anger, or you don't say how you feel and you aren't truthful about how you feel about a certain situation or a certain person, then if you repress that down, unconsciously and subconsciously, it will then start to spike back up into the way that you treat somebody else, or the way that anger that you hold toward that you didn't express is now being held inside of you, and it's making you respond and react in certain ways. It's almost like there's polarized forces, and once you swing one way, it almost like swings the other. I don't know whether that's a good way of thinking about it. And this is my understanding of it at this current moment in time, by the way. I'm by no means, a specialist on this. And this is all, I think, it's a good place to start. There's books you can read, and, integrating your subconscious is pretty important it's actually pretty devastating in certain ways, because then you start to see very difficult things. You start to see why you are the way that you are, which can be very, very difficult and very hard, because you build your whole life based off that. And you almost you go back and you tell the story of your life. You understand who you are, the story of your life, to then be able to venture forward with more authenticity and with more wholeness, in control of who you are. And I don't think we'll ever be able to be totally in control and totally, let's say, let go of the unconscious, because there's always going to be things, of course, but the majority of people aren't even aware of this, and they're being drove by drivers that they don't even know are there, and it's almost as if it's fate, and people are the way that they are, and that's just the way that they are, and they can't change. And that's not the case in any way. You can always change, and you can always adapt and grow and be better moving forward. And that's what this is all about. It's about being better. And I know it might sound sometimes quite depressing, or as if it can be quite difficult. And it's a path that you don't want to go down, because it's not really nice. But I think in life, suffering is integral. It's important. And the best path isn't always the path of least resistance. The best path is the one that challenges you, that allows you to take responsibility, that takes you on the adventure of a lifetime. That's the best path. And whatever that path is, and is revealed in front of you, is the path in which you should take, because you don't know what's on the other side of that. And usually what comes with suffering in certain ways, and you can see this with lots of things, like even like the physical element, and this is why I think I've been attracted to it for so long, is like when you push your body so hard, you give yourself a sense of confidence and evidence that you can do great things. You are somebody who can do those things, and that's an amazing thing to have, a great trait, a great belief to hold about yourself. And I guess you can do this in many different ways in life. And one of them can be external with physical things, but another one can be internal. And I believe that that's probably one of the hardest, if not the hardest one, journey that you probably ever go on, because it's so complex. And it sometimes leads you to see to see things that you've never really seen before, good and bad. And that can kind of create a bit of a ripple effect in your life in many different areas. And that's why I suppose in the little passage that I wrote at the start, I was talking a little bit about relationships, because that's definitely one way in my life it has sent a bit of a ripple, and it's been very, very difficult. I'd probably say one of the most difficult parts of the process. And I'm just being open and honest about that. Embracing true authenticity, you could say. So how do we do this? Or I'll give you some pointers on how I did it, and some bits and bobs. I think journaling again is great. Just making sure to write your thoughts down every day. You know, if you went through something at work or with your relationships, or even if you're caught in traffic and somebody pulled out in front of you, you can reflect on those times and you can say, why did I respond in that way? Is it because you've done it in the past? Is it because of this? Is it because of that? Is it because the way you were when you were younger? You can start to create a picture and a painting of your past. You can create a picture, a painting of why you are the way that you are. So journaling's an amazing tool. I think going to the gym and training is your physical fitness, running, physical fitness. What do you do for your mental fitness? Journaling is that. Writing is that. So that would be a really good place to start, I think, for a lot of people. Journaling, I think it's a great habit to get into. And then I think there's some others here. I think obviously like meditation would be really good. And then there's like yoga classes and meditation and reconnecting with your body and slowing down. I think they're great because they offer a space for you to observe your thoughts, which is obviously really important. But there's solitude, stillness and time that I've put. And these are the difficult parts I think a lot of people really struggle to get, because pardon me, to be able to slow down and have time, it's almost as if you can't do that because you're on this hamster wheel. How do you find that? And I don't want that to be a barrier to entry to anyone, because you can still do things, you can still work and you can still move forward, regardless of what's going on, you know. But time for me, and I feel like one of the reasons why I've been able to progress so quickly with this and understand this to the level of detail that I do now, whether that is the level of detail, probably somebody listening who knows this through and through is like, what is this guy on about? He's chatting shit. Well, that's my shit and I'm chatting it. So to have the time is because I built a position really where I could slow down to the point where I could work a lot less. I could still function. I could still work with all my clients, but I built the systems and I built the framework to be able to take my foot off the gas and then have so much more time back to myself in my days to be able to self-reflect. I also thought I bought my own house, and obviously I live on my own as well. And that's come with its difficulties, most definitely. But some of the positives is I've been able to have the space and the time to be with my own thoughts, which is very scary. And at the start, I couldn't be with my own thoughts. I couldn't sit with my own thoughts for 10 minutes. I would then start doing something else because I'd be trying to get away from my own thoughts. Now, I love it. I enjoy being with my own thoughts, and not having to be dragged from pillar to post with the next external stimulus or whatever it is going on. And I'm not at a point where that's completely gone, but I'm a lot more comfortable with it. But solitude, stillness and time, slowing down. I guess all these things are about slowing down and reflecting and thinking, and having periods where you stop and you assess what's going on in your mind. It's really important to be able to do that, because I think a lot of culture today, like being alone is seen as quite bad, or being with your thoughts is seen is something that it's not really something that we speak about. It's always about being with somebody else or doing something else or what the next thing is. And sometimes it's not about the next thing. It's about right here and right now. That's what life is about. It's about being present in the moment and how we can actually generate the most amount of presence in the moment. And if we're not running away from ourselves all the time and we can sit with ourselves, then it's almost as if we can bring fulfillment and joy into that moment a lot of the time. And that's not to say that that's something that I have done, but it's definitely something that I'm doing a lot more of, and definitely working my way towards. And it's not like you get to this spot and then, happy days, you're done, sign the contract, off you go. And that's that. It's a process, of course, and there's different things that happen in life and whatever it may be. And until those things happen, it's just you do the best that you can do, and you understand yourself as best as you can do, and you take whatever path comes ahead of you. So yeah, that was a bit of a here, there, and everywhere. But hopefully, I made some sense with all of that, and I've been able to articulate myself in a decent manner. And if you found this useful, let me know. Drop it a like. We hit 100 Spotify followers, which is pretty cool. I think that's the coolest 100 followers I've got on anything. That's something about Spotify, which I think is pretty cool. So I'm pretty happy with that. If you think somebody else who you know would find this beneficial or they would enjoy it, send it across to them. I'd love some feedback, and share this, with anybody who you think it would find useful, I suppose. Apart from that, have a good day, and I appreciate you listening along, and I look forward to maybe doing similar ones I like to these in the future. See you soon.